Hi, Keith. How you doing?
Hello, Tony. All good, thank you. And you?
I'm doing okay. A little bit of a cold, but I'm getting over it. So my voice might be a little bit, strange or weird or whatever. Hey,
You
Keith,
have your sexy voice today, right?
oh, the sexy voice. Wow. Keith, I had, I was thinking about something, something we discussed about, we talked about, quite a bit. It's
Hmm.
about the expectation that everyone has of HR. Sometimes I get the feeling, or I had the feeling that, I was like in the middle of, management wanting something, employees, staff wanting something, management
Mm.
expectations. And sometimes the staff thought that we were, taking the place of the association or of the union. What are your recollections?
Oh, thank you, Tony. That's a good one, isn't it? Good for any aspiring HR people to kind of realize where they are. And it's kind of the cheese in the sandwich, really, because you are a part of management. It's called human resource management, and you are a part of management. But also, if you've got a heart, you're also taking care of the people. But you're neither in some ways one nor the other, because um, you need to be in a position to stop management from doing things which are crazy. And I can certainly remember having to speak up at times when management were over pushing it, whilst at the same time saying to, a staff member, actually, what you're doing is not in accordance with the rules. It's not the way things need to go. And no, can't agree with that at all. So you're sort of in between. You're the cheese, as I say, or ham or whatever you want to be, in
I'm
between the
vegetarian,
sandwich.
so we'll
You're
stick to the cheese.
Okay, we stick with cheese, vegetarian cheese
Yeah.
in the sandwich. And I think that's something that is lost sometimes because staff don't recognize that, and management, they see you as something slightly different, but that's where you're stuck in the middle there.
I found that sometimes management was very hard on HR, like
Mm,
in the sense of expecting things that were just not possible.
mm,
And what I thought was really crazy sometimes was that a lot of the rules were written by management. Yes, sometimes in negotiations, if we're talking about like with union contracts, but sometimes organizations write the rules and then we have difficulty as an organization then in enforcing our rules because maybe times have changed and we would like to, just our management would like to just do things, and you can't just do things. There's no such thing as being able to say to someone, "Well, I don't care about the rules of engagement." To talk about something happening today, like it's you can't just say, "Well, those are the rules." Well, I am the rules. We don't. We live in a world of rules, so I found it sometimes very difficult to have to stand up and to management and say, "Look, we, you and I, you management, executive management, and top management, and your humble HR function, we wrote these rules, and now if we want to change them, we gotta go through a process."
I thought I think that one of the things that was very effective actually in trimming slightly the excesses of overzealous managers was often to say to them, look, these are the rules. This has been agreed, perhaps with the trade unions, as you say, or some higher policy level.
Hmm.
Yeah, we can break them, but you realize that means we're in court. That means we're now liable, because we're not following what we have put down as our own policies and practices. And that often used to, there would be a kind of sucking of teeth. Well, I'm not really sure about that. I don't really want to go to an appeals court or go into some legal issue over this. So that was often the thing that, as you rightly say, as the HR person, you need to know, certainly in the commercial world, particularly, you need to know the external law, the law of the land, and then you need to know your own company's laws and policies and its procedures, and that's the point.
Well, I also noticed that sometimes managers just want to do things. They got to go fast, and that can cause bigger delays because of protest or going to court or going to an appeals process within the organization. But I usually try to offer a compromise where, because most legislations allow that if you have rules and the parties agree to deviate from the rules and you do it in a transparent process, it takes a little bit more time, and it also takes parties recognizing each other. And I found that also to be difficult sometimes. if you have, if you wrote a rule and the rule says that you can, these are the working times and you're very rigid about them. And then all at once something happens and you need time to be different, the hours of operation. Normally, if you sit down with the parties, your bosses, your executive management or top leadership or whatever, and or sometimes even with a unit, sometimes it's necessary. Here's my cat. Sometimes it's necessary for the organization to take its time and develop what is it that the organization really wants, and the changes, those even temporary changes, and you can make agreements with the parties. But I see that there's a lot of resistance in doing that and just saying, well, we're the organization, and if either like it or leave it. I don't know
Well,
what your experience is
it's a
with that.
question of
Yeah.
reasonableness, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's often, if you can get agreement to a change from all parties, if everyone can sign up to say, yeah, look, the circumstances are such that we understand why management or why the
Hmm.
organization is trying to do this, and therefore, we can all
Hmm.
agree on this occasion. I think you've opened the doors, and that's reasonableness. The problem is when there's no reasonableness. So for example, I can remember early in my days, you had people that needed to walk from one end of of the place where I worked at the time, which was a military establishment. They needed to walk a long way from where they were working in the sheds. They were actually
Hmm.
industrial people to get to the exit. So when you talk about time, well, should you allow a bit of walking time? I mean, that seems reasonable, doesn't it? And the
Hmm.
answer is yes. And so managers would probably let the people who were the very furthest away, who had to walk. There was no cars
Hmm.
allowed. You had to walk to the exit and then catch your bus or get your car from the car park, what have you. Um, Let them go 5 minutes earlier was a kind of just understood. It was something that was a local agreement. Local managers understood it. It was reasonable. Everybody was fine. It's unreasonableness that often gets people worked up on both sides. Unreasonableness of staff too.
That's a very interesting point because a lot of the things have to do with logic and being very, sometimes people are so rigid on both sides because I found also sometimes workers being extremely rigid about, well, my job says this is my job description. That's a famous one. My job description says, well, yes, your job description says, but many times the job description is an indication. Sometimes it's vague. If you don't have the flexibility to change, something I noted also in my studies when I was doing my doctorate was that some things that we think are really good, like commitment, being committed to the organization, sometimes it has a negative aspect to it, which is you don't want to change anything. You want everything to stay the same way. And so, yes, being committed is good and sticking, following what the job says. But people get comfortable sometimes in just repeating always the same thing. And just by staying like that, they become a problem for changing the organization, and they end up then maybe losing their job because the organization doesn't make it. A company that doesn't stay in tune with the environment at some point could go upside down if it doesn't change.
You've got two good points there, really. What I think, if we merge them together and talk about job descriptions in the melting pot of change,
Hmm.
um, most of the job descriptions that I've ever had the good fortune to be involved in drafting or working with have had something at the bottom which says any other duties or any other related duties that may be required, which gave that a degree of flexibility, without, though, putting an individual in a situation where they're hired as I don't know, a legal advisor, and then they're told, now we want you to go and be a security guard. It
Right.
had to be related. It had to be something
Yeah.
that was relevant. So that degree of flexibility was good. When you talk about change, I think that's again back to the reasonableness and back to the understanding of, and I know we're going to another subject, communication. Why are you doing this? What's the background to this? Why do I need to change? Because ultimately, and this is going to be very contentious, but I believe that ultimately people will say, what's in it for me? If they can see a change that actually makes their life better, easier, things faster, processes improve, everything better, yeah, they're more likely to go along with it. When they're just told this is what's happening from Monday, they're normally very suspicious and more reluctant to move and do that.
Yeah. That's a very good point. The issue of buy-in.
Mm.
of people buying into the change process or what you're trying to do, and I think that's fundamental. And the whole issue of job descriptions is kind of interesting. When I got into I started working and I was working for NATO in Naples, Italy, and I had to deal with Italian legislation. And what I discovered was that in Italy, job descriptions were kind of put to the side because you were encouraged to not write job descriptions, but use general titles,
Hmm.
because the job description became sort of a contractual responsibility for the
Yeah.
parties. And if you didn't write everything in it, at some point they also said everything, that one line on the bottom was not really legal. You couldn't really put that in. So the parties, both unions and management, at some point decided to get rid of the actual job description and to have titles which were descriptive. And if the title was descriptive and commonly understood, it seemed to work fine. And so
I,
we had less legal cases by not having job descriptions. And then you can say, well,
I'm wondering.
everyone knows what a qualified electrician is supposed to do, and this is what a qualified one does, and this is what a specialized one does, and this is what a highly specialized one does, and everyone seemed to be happy with that. And so, but then on the other hand, you had like a boss coming in, a new leader, maybe from another country, and saying, I don't know what people are supposed to do. I need to see something written down. So we had job descriptions on the management side, so the managers could know what people did, but you did not give them to the worker, because if you gave it to the worker and worker signed it, it became part of the contract, and that was the only thing you could ask the worker to do. So in a
That's
global environment, I
fascinating.
think even the concept of a job description becomes interesting, and how the legal. So you were saying you have to know the legal requirements of where you're at.
Absolutely, and I think what you're displaying there is the cultural differences. One of the areas that's interesting about human resources is obviously knowing the people and knowing the cultural environment, the values, and so on that go on in the organization and the people around you. I don't think in many parts that would probably work. I mean, in northern European style would be, yeah, there needs to be a job description somewhere for no other reason than the fact that the boss knows what the person is supposed to be doing who's working for them, and that we can use that when we advertise for new people. But
Yeah.
also because the performance management systems, which is, again, that's a whole nother issue we could talk about, but the
Yeah.
performance management systems are very often based on the work that's being done in accordance with the job description. And that also has an effect on the grading. So when someone can show that, look, this is way above my normal job description, the things I'm doing here, the responsibilities I have mean I should be regraded and, be on a higher pay scale. It actually was quite an important document. And as you say, part of the contract. So I think what you've highlighted brilliantly there is, where you work and what goes on. I don't know what we can call that, like customer practice or something like that. But
Yeah, I think it's
yeah,
local practices. Yeah, they
mm,
become if we're looking at an international environment, global environment, and for me as an American, it's been always a big battle to tell the American side in management and say, well, we have Europeans have a different view for some things like that'll be another topic for us, I guess, the work-life balance, and
mm,
if there's 30 days off a year for vacation, is it 30 days in the sense of 30 work days or 30 calendar days? But whatever it is, it's much more than an American would think in terms of vacation time, for at least in starting jobs or even all the way mid-level. I mean, you have to be really senior to start in terms of seniority, in terms of many years that you've worked in the organization, to start getting something similar to what is a normal European period of time off. So it's very culturally based. Yeah.
absolutely. And I remember, I don't know if I can reveal this, but I've started, so I'll finish. I can remember that many of my European colleagues, I know UK is part of Europe, but only marginally so. Um,
We'll
that they
touch
would
that
have
topic
very,
some other
I
time.
know,
Yeah.
yeah, we will, very long lunch hours that,
Yeah.
which were not an hour. And that would be a full meal, a starter, a main
Yeah.
course, a dessert, a coffee, and maybe a glass of wine with it. And that was because that's what culturally they were used to. It didn't mean that they weren't working hard either side of that, but that's what they would expect. Whereas, traditionally, and again, I'll say North Americans, Canadians, or from the USA or from the UK, it was more, let's grab a sandwich, we have half an hour and then we get back to it. So
Yeah.
I think this is a brilliant area to explore as an HR person
Yeah.
is how far do you push it one way or the other? And the answer to that is get to know the culture of the organization and of the people.
Yeah, and I think also you have to also see what is the real objective. Are we
Mm,
trying to treat everyone in a way that they fit into the organizational rules that have been established, or are we looking at productivity? And how do you
right,
balance the two things?
right.
I've had cases where before the COVID times, that remote work became kind of normal for a lot of people. But I remember cases of people that would produce much more if you let them be just alone someplace to do their thing, not necessarily in the organizational spaces. So if they stayed
Yes.
home or if they
Yeah.
were some other place producing, then is that okay or not okay? Well, now with COVID, remote work had become like a norm, a standard. But that whole issue of how do you make sure that the rules and the organizational objectives and expectations of people all match, and that's where I think we come in as HR, and we are that cheese in the sandwich, and sometimes I just don't know if we are
I know.
we get melted sometimes,
We get melted. That's a good one. And sometimes there's a bit of pickle added to
Yeah,
spice
yeah,
things
yeah,
up.
yeah.
Um, I think what I'd like to just ask you though, Tony, is in that role as an HR person, um, there comes a time when you've got kind of a battle within yourself, right, between heart and head.
Right.
How did you have any cases where you felt, look, for this person, I really feel sorry for them. I empathize with them. I understand it, but my head is telling me, that unfortunately, the redundancy notice has to be served. This person has to go. How did you deal with that?
Well, I think that I had an experience where I had to close down a headquarters, and but the issue was working with every single person and trying to see how their future would work out. And obviously, I couldn't do everything, but there were a lot of things that I could do. I could convince management for a good handshake, a package which would work nicely for redundancy. In the case I was working in Italy, so I was working with the Italian authorities for placement. I mean, there were many things that one can do, and I think that people understand when you get to the point that something cannot go on, they understand. And at the end, I received a certificate from the workers, basically saying, they knew they couldn't give me a gift, so I got a nice certificate signed by all the workers, thanking me for having done everything possible to make things work out. And so I
Amazing.
think that it's always an issue of how do you balance your heart and head. And if you're thinking in terms of, well, some things have to be done, you can't do anything about it. Can you make it as best as possible for the person or the people when you get to the point? And that's where I think there's a difference between a good HR person, because one more thing, by taking care of the workers, I reduce the legal cases. And so
Right.
if you're able to do things in a way that you also show managers and say, look, I'm doing X, Y, Z, and I'm spending time in this, but we're not going to have legal cases, or we're going to reduce the legal cases to bare minimum. Then a good leadership will understand that and thank you for it. Obviously, there's always someone who says, it's not your money. That's why you're giving it away. That's another issue that you have to always face, is that someone's telling you that, you're supposed to represent the company. Well, you are representing the company. You're reducing legal cases, which will cost much more, because sometimes top management does things or says things. That's another big issue. How difficult it is sometimes for us to have to tell top management, please do not make that statement in public,
Oh,
because that
oh,
statement will be used against us in court. Do not say the following things. Sometimes it's even the point that you have to tell top management, don't say how great the workers are, because if you keep saying how great the workers are in a certain way, you're basically getting everyone a pay raise, because you're saying that they're doing much more work than the job requires. That's a no-no in some countries. You have to say that they're doing great, but you don't want to say, oh, he's working well beyond his pay grade.
no.
That's an admission. You go to court, and the worker says, "Well, top management said I'm doing this."
or saying that, I realize that you have a very stressful job.
That's another one. Yeah.
You're mounting up something for somebody to go off sick and say, look, even my managers know that I was under stress.
Yeah.
But I would say that was a very interesting point you raised there about managers saying things, and my goodness me, yeah, it takes me back. This is a great area.
We'll have to
Promises.
explore it in another episode also, so we don't.
Promises that management make. I think that's
Yeah,
definitely
yeah.
one that we ought to cover at another one.
Public statements by management. How do you deal with public that's a great topic. That's another one we'll have to do for our podcast here.
Sure.
Keith, we're at 20 minutes.
Great.
Do we want to say goodbye now? And
I think
we'll meet up again very soon. We'll try to.
Yeah, we covered a few areas.
Quite a few things this time, and we'll start up again with another episode very soon, and we'll pick up. We'll choose. We touched many topics today. I think we're gonna have to choose one of them and stick to that one.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing on your cat. What's his name?
It's a she. It's Mia.
Oh, okay. Mia. Thank you, Mia, for your guest appearance.
Yeah, she got bored. She looked at you for quite a bit, and she looked at me, and she said, "I don't see anything to eat here," and she left.
No, fair enough. Okay, thanks, Tony.
See you soon. Thanks a lot.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, Keith. Bye-bye.